kids.
This is Learning to Dad
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
with Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
Hey, welcome to Learning to Dad, and I am Tyler Ross. Our guest today is Abtin Buergari. What's up, man?
Hey.
Abtin's a very good friend of mine. I'm excited to sit here and talk to him because I'm going to get to probe a bunch of questions out of him that we've never talked about.
Cheers.
So, yeah, it'll be fun. So, typically the arc of the conversation is, who are you? What are you doing? How was that impacted when your family grew? And then we get into some parenting stuff. So, I want to ask you just right out of the gate, like, what are you doing now as a profession, as an entrepreneur? Because you are a dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur.
Cheers. So what I'm doing now is spending most of my time working on a project with a team of people that are building a digital marketing business. That consumes about 50 to 75% of my time. I do have a couple other businesses that I'm running with other people, and they have operators and they're doing well. And so my role is much more of a advisory role, and it's interesting. After you build your first one, you learn so many lessons along the way that if you find the right person that can build a business with you and you empower them and enable them, a lot of times you don't have to spend a lot of your energy there, more of your brain power more than anything else. Yeah. So I'm spending a lot of my time in the space of digital marketing. I don't come from a marketing background, so this world for the last almost 3 years now, totally new to me and super interesting and definitely the wave of the future. So.
Yeah, no question about that. I love talking to you about all the different applications it has and all of it. So, and it'll be fun to talk about your role now as an entrepreneur versus the first company that you started and sold, because I'd imagine that was like the difference between being a parent, this is what I expect of you, this is what you do parent, to let me get out of your way and see how you evolve parent. Maybe I don't know if that's a fair.
Yeah, interesting. I tried listening carefully to that analogy. Why don't you say it one more time?
Well, let's talk about Midas first.
Yeah.
Tell me about that company.
Sure. So actually, Midas was two companies, two separate businesses. It started out as purely a data processing company focused on the legal industry. The easiest explanation is our job was to find evidence for the lawyers on massive cases. So, a big case for us would be 500 million to 1 billion emails and documents.
Wow.
That's a big case. A smaller case would be 25 million emails and documents collection.
Okay.
And our job was to break that data into pieces and normalize it, which makes everything kind of author to from CC, all the fielded values inside of documents normalize, and then use data techniques to identify potential evidence and present that to the lawyers so they can start to understand what the case is really about versus what they're being told it's about.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that was my very first company, and it did really well. It was purely in Washington, D.C. Ironically, didn't have a website, no marketing, none of that nonsense, right? It was just purely word of mouth, and it grew pretty rapidly, became one of, if not the largest companies in the D.C. area that was focused in D.C. providing that service. And then as we were working in the space, the attorneys started asking us questions about, well, it's hard to look at it, and is there better ways to look at the documents? And so we kind of explored that realm, and we started hosting the documents online and creating visualizations about what's happening with the documents. So imagine if me and you are two executives working at Exxon and we got in trouble, or we didn't get in trouble, but Exxon's getting sued for something, and maybe we're interwoven into the issue. So they would call us a custodian of documents, right? So the relationship between what we're talking about, subjects, who else we're talking about very regularly, who else is involved in our email communications, time frames, those things start to give us the clues to what is actually going on, right? And so we started creating really cool visuals online for people, and that really jumped the company's valuation dramatically.
What was different about your company to grow at that kind of pace versus other companies that offered such services?
That's a great question that I'm asking myself right now as I'm growing this other company. Not a lot. I would say the advantage in that industry is I always joke, there's like 700 buyers of the service in all of DC, period. Yeah. Maybe 700 to 1,000 buyers across the whole country.
Yeah.
Is that right? No, that's wrong. But, the point is a very concentrated group of buyers. I would say maybe 10,000 true buyers across the country, something along those lines. The point is, you know who your buyers are.
Right.
That's a very big challenge for most businesses.
Sure.
They think they know who their buyers are, but they definitely don't.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines is, anybody with arms and legs is my customer. It's like, yeah, that's wrong.
It could be right.
Could be right. I
could
guess,
be right. If you're Facebook,
sure.
Right? We refer to that as reach.
Yeah.
Right? But definitely not the case for my company. I think the thing that really made us great was we delivered a fabulously good product. It was accurate. It was on time. I think that's right because most of our business came from referrals, attorneys talking to each other, telling each other about us. Yeah. I think we were really good at what we did, exceptionally good. And the irony is you could throw a hard drive out the window and hit 5 companies that claimed they could do what we were doing, but they weren't able to. Maybe as cleanly as well. Definitely cheaper. We were definitely not ever cheap. Yeah. We were always either the most expensive or the second or third most expensive in every bid that we got in.
Yeah, so the exit for you was a sale of that company.
Yeah, so the first one, Modus, it was just called Modus. The second company was called Modus Hosting. Eventually, I brought them together and made one larger organization and sold that business the first time in 2012 to private equity. And, we continue to grow that business, a lot larger. And then in 2014, late 2014, 15, they started getting the itch to sell the business again. And, at that point, I wasn't going to make a huge return. So, of course, I had no choice. They own the business, right? So I went along for the ride. And so that was kind of the end of my period in that business.
Okay, so can you talk, and if you don't want to, please don't, but can you talk a little bit about how many employees you had or revenue numbers,
sure.
Anything like that?
So I don't know what their revenues are now, but when we were building the business, it went from 0 in 2007, 8, late 7 to 8. It went from 0 to I think it was 9 million in 2000, closing 2011. Yeah, I think. And, super profitable business. I mean, just radically profitable. We'd automated everything. I mean, you hand a hard drive in like we're drinking coffee kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And so that was that period. And then from there, it grew to $25 million, $27 million in a couple of years later. But its profitability was dramatically less, which, is... it was a mom and pop still just generating a ton of revenue, right? It didn't have an accounting process. I mean, our DSO is 125 days to give you a sense.
What is DSO?
Days outstanding on your invoice.
Okay.
Yeah. So
what was it?
125 days.
Geez, yeah.
Yeah. So, there was a lot of risk on the table. And I think that was part of the reason me and the other partners were like, it's a good time for us to, have somebody else shoulder some of this risk.
Yeah, so let's talk about how you started that company, because as I recall, that you borrowed money from your mom to buy your first server, right?
$5,000.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So how did I start the company? I was working in that industry for a competitive company, and they were just not good at what they were doing. I mean, we could talk about it and get the lawyers to buy it from us, but when it came time to delivering the product, it was a disaster.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard on me. I don't like telling people something and not giving them what I say. Mm-hmm. And I was in law school. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. I definitely didn't want any more people to get mad at me in the legal community. So I shared with them that I'm not really interested in continuing the way it is. I'd like to break off and just do consulting work for them. And they didn't like that. And so they fired me and kind of kicked me out the door in a not so nice manner. But it was a couple of my clients at the time called me and said, hey, can we just call you and ask you questions about how to do this and stuff? And, I don't know. I thought to myself, if I was making $150 an hour on a billable rate, mm-hmm. I could put myself through law school. That's honestly where a lot of this started.
Yeah.
And then it was my last year in law school. it was like we had 2 clients and then we had 4 clients and then I couldn't go to class anymore.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, what am I going to do? And I decided that I'm going to give this thing a run.
Yeah.
And, it was incredibly hard. I mean, it's funny because it's real easy to get to a couple $1 million of revenue.
Mhm.
It's really hard to get up to 10.
Yeah.
It's super hard to get to 20, 30 organically.
Yeah.
And that organic journey continues, especially when you're in a concentrated buyer group. If you have a larger reach like Facebook, it's not.
Right.
Once you hit that moment and you're growing, you can keep that engine going. So,
Yes. Yeah. So you went from being in law school, nearly done. You were in your third year, second or third
I was
year?
I was a night student. I was in my 4th year.
Yeah.
I was in my first semester of my 4th year.
And you started, and the company just kind of grew to the point where you had to pick school or the company.
I remember his name is, I don't know if he's the dean anymore, but his name was Dean Grossman. And I went to his office and I said, Dean Grossman, I'm having a lot of problems because, I don't mean to pat myself on the back, but I took law school really seriously. And, I was in the International Law Review and I was, scoring really, really high scores in school and all this fun stuff. And I was like, look, this is my senior writing class. It was like the last writing class and I just couldn't do the work for it.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I was like, what do I do? Should I just drop out of my credits? And he was like, you can, or you can just get, B's and C's and finish it out.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't my style.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I probably should have done that. But he also told me that my credits would stick with me for a few years if I decided to just come back.
Yeah.
And so, I just didn't go to class anymore that semester. And I ended up paying a whole bunch of money for that stupidly.
Yeah.
I've never been one to be like I guess back then I wasn't very like planned out. Like I would just chase my passion.
Yeah.
And so I talked to my favorite professor who's still there, Andrew Popper, really awesome guy. And he told me that I should just quit and just do what I really believe in. And so now I sit here with you, living in Marshall, Virginia.
Yeah. That's something for a professor at a school to encourage a student, like, quit.
He didn't encourage me to quit so much as he encouraged me to chase my passion. And he
validated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's a very passionate guy. He's such a great professor. I mean, he taught me some really great lessons in law school. So,
So we're doing a biography backwards in time.
I guess.
So prior to college, prior to law school, there's college, of course, and then prior to that, like, tell me a little bit about zero to college, Abtin, because you're from an immigrant family.
Yeah.
And you've got a wonderful story of like coming here and living the American dream, as they call it.
Definitely the American dream. I immigrated here from Iran when I was 5 years old. Came with my mom. My dad stayed back. Didn't want to come to America.
Yeah.
Had built a really nice architectural practice in Iran. Him and his brother is now like one of the largest providers of government contracting, development government contracting work to Iran. So him and his brother, that was their practice.
Yeah.
And so he didn't want to leave.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so my mom and I came here when I was 5. My dad later came when I was 9, stayed permanently. We were very poor, obviously. And I lived with my grandmother until I was 6, 7, maybe 8, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom worked 2 jobs. And my mom started her first business before she could really speak English.
Yeah.
Still does it to this day. One of the best at it in the country.
Yeah.
Regularly put in, articles and stuff. And she does. It focuses on window treatment, but it's an interior design business.
Okay.
And so she's been running that business for, how many years has it been? Let's find out. 30 years.
Yeah.
Almost 30 years, I think. Yeah. Very successfully. Taught me one of the best lessons in business. If you have the cash, spend it. If you don't spend it. Real simple, right? Very simple. I mean, it gets you to a certain point, but it's the right mantra, especially for young businesses. So, came here in high school. My dad actually handed me a computer when I was like 10 or 11 years old, an IBM PS2, and I started just messing around with it.
Yeah.
Taking it apart, putting it back together, understanding what an operating system was. Back then it was DOS, then it was MS-DOS, then it was Windows 2.5, 3.1, all that stuff. And And when I got in high school, I started working for the WashingtonPost.com back before it was the WashingtonPost.com as we see it today.
Yeah.
And when I got to college, I wanted nothing to do with computers at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I studied philosophy. I started out as an aerospace engineer major that lasted a solid 2.5 years. And then I just realized that I don't want anything to do with math and science.
Yeah.
And so I took this philosophy class, and this lady was teaching this class. It was about gay, lesbian rights, euthanasia, abortion, some of those topics that back then were these really hot topics, where today I think our society is starting to finally move past some of the stigma related to them.
Sure.
But it was a philosophy class about them, and it was just so great. It was so amazing. It just, when you find something that you're really interested in and passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent all my time reading everything I could find on not just those topics, but just the classes I was taking, and I was really into it. What you get out of undergraduate with a 3.0, maybe a 2.8 and a philosophy degree is absolutely no jobs. So I left University of Maryland with no job prospects, and I sent out all these resumes and nobody wanted to give me a job. And finally, a temp agency placed me as a temp guy at a law firm. And that was like the beginning of my career.
Okay, so you decided to go to law school after your experience there. Did you have in mind to go to law school while you were a philosophy major?
Exactly. So at the end of undergraduate, I took my LSAT. And, interestingly, that was the very first time I had a rude awakening. I took the LSAT and scored like abysmal. And I remember being like, I must be stupid or something. Like something is wrong with me. But the reality is every test is made a certain way. Yeah. So if you study how the test is made, and you can get better, right? So although I didn't get good GPA, I did score pretty substantially on the LSAT. And so I got into a couple of really good schools around here. And that's a message to all the people that the world, the way the world is set up doesn't work for them. It's okay. You can hack it. It's no problem, right? Just do you.
That's
right.
so true. And I can relate on the LSAT thing because I've studied for the LSAT before. And you really have to study on how to answer the questions, not to find out what the answer is, but because there's a methodical approach to do it. And if you don't know that approach, you got nothing.
Exactly. It's intended to be a certain way. And so took the LSAT. Wasn't sure I wanted to go to law school, so I just kind of hunkered in for a year, worked at this law firm called Skadden Arps and in D.C. for a short period of time. And then I got my first real full-time job at a law firm called Preston Gates, Ellis Revelis Meads at the time, now called KL Gates. It's in the top 10 law firm size-wise law firms, and it's got an amazing practice. And at the time, it was a smaller firm, and I got my groundwork in how to be a professional from some of the most elite members of the DC community. I mean, some of the most powerful lobbyists, some of the most powerful lawyers, still my friends today, still give me great advice on my career. I'm very close to them. And, they kind of gave me the start of my career, and that's kind of where I got started.
I want to ask you about being an immigrant family, because that seems to be a common theme among a lot of families that come here. They come here with nothing and then totally transform their lives. Why do you think that's a consistent? Is it because those are the stories that I'm hearing, or do you think there's something intrinsic in coming from somewhere that's hard to make it, where opportunity is lacking, to a place where my perception is that there's more opportunity here than anywhere else? I don't know. But why do you think that that's like your mom found tremendous success? You've found tremendous success from a business perspective.
If you don't have anything, you have a different kind of will to get what you need, right? When I was building Modus, the very first iteration of it, I was super poor. I was very, very poor. I was in bad shape, you know. We didn't pay any of our bills, The big running joke that I always tell people when they ask me, how much pain have you endured? I couldn't send my mortgage company a check. They wouldn't accept a check from me. I had to physically go to the bank with a money order. Yeah. And they would take the money order at the teller and they would put it into their account. And then that's how I paid my mortgage. Like, that's how bad it was, right?
Yeah.
So when you're faced with that, a couple things happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
You perish
Mm-hmm.
or you don't. And if you don't, you have the mental strength to do things that other people aren't able or willing to do.
Yeah.
And so immigrant families, they deal with that the same way, exactly the same scenario they deal with for their families. So if you imagine having absolutely nothing and thinking to yourself, I have to put food on the table, otherwise my kids are going to starve.
Yeah.
And I'm going to actually go one step further and say, when we see homeless people with their kids on the street with them, it's not because they have to be there.
Yeah.
It's because they're using their children in some sense as a ploy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I hate to make that really broad, strong statement, but I
Sure,
actually believe it pretty
exceptions, of
strongly.
course. Yeah.
Yeah, of course there's exceptions.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a lot of homeless people have mental issues. Like, there's a lot of stuff in that, but what I'm trying to say is that the essence of it,
Mm-hmm.
when you have a family and you're responsible for that family and you take that responsibility seriously, which most of us that have a family do, and you're an immigrant, you know, the world is effectively against you. I mean, every day you wake up, you look at the news. What's the news telling you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Every job you go into, they can't understand you because you don't speak perfect, clear English. Every time you write something down, it doesn't make sense because you're translating from a different language that's probably based on a Roman, French,
Yeah. One of the
dialect,
Romantic
right?
languages,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't translate exactly, or even, Chinese, Asian, Farsi, all those languages are very, very different than English. So you can't write you can't speak, you can't write. So you get really comfortable with being beaten on, and you get really comfortable with hearing no.
Yeah.
And once you do, you can take over the world if you want to.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about taking risks. Like, you took your first risk by leaving law school. I assume this is your first risk of significance, where you're leaving law school to pursue this and build this business. How do you feel about, like, what you were giving up to do that? Do you recall your mental state of, like, this is a real life decision I'm making here?
Wow, really good question. No one's ever asked me that question. My biggest first risk was actually in college, where I alienated myself from all my friends because I decided to sell legal insurance to college kids who definitely don't need legal insurance. And
Yeah.
I put myself in a tremendous amount of credit card debt.
Is that right?
Yeah, doing it.
What inspired that? Like, talk about what it is.
I think the thing that's always inspired me, I think the thing that inspired me up until 2012 was the desire to be free from the financial constraints of the world.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think when I've made my decision to go out there and do something, it's because I sought financial freedom. And I think part of that is the deeply burned in, pain you feel when you have nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So why did I do it? Because I thought I could be a millionaire.
Yeah. Yeah.
With one of these companies that was like a multi-level marketing company. What are they called? You know what
Sure,
I'm talking
yeah,
about. You go to
pyramid
tell your
scheme
friends.
type
Yeah,
things,
exactly. That was my first one in college. Hook, line, and sinker, man. I put so much energy into it. I made a little bit of money. I didn't totally, shit the bed, but but it wasn't, the thing that was going to give me the breakthrough. So when I actually remember not thinking very much about leaving law school and the hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and not getting a degree. It's so strange. No one's asked me the question, and I've never really thought back to it. It was kind of that decision point where I was like, I just need to do this and try.
Yeah. So the fear of the debt, the fear of the burden of all that work and not getting the degree, was pretty easy to cut off and pursue your first modus.
I don't remember what it felt like because it was a while ago.
Like, where were your parents on that?
They didn't know about it.
Of course not.
They didn't know about it. I'll tell you, I think a lot of it was my unbelievably amazing wife who told me that she would live in a cardboard box with me if it all went to shit. So am I allowed to curse on this?
No
okay,
problem.
all right. I'll try to keep it to
Shit,
a minimum.
balls, fuck.
Okay.
It's fine.
All right. Yeah. So I think it was a lot of it was her. You know, she told me that she'd be okay if we were in devastating
It creates
debt.
some freedom, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into like,
sure.
at what point did you meet your wife, Julia, and when did you get married?
I met my wife 14 years? Yeah. Be 15 years next April. So yeah, 14 years ago. Got married 2 years after that.
So you were in law school?
No. Oh yeah, I was right before law school.
Yeah.
It was right before, like literally, it was like 6 months before I started law school. Yeah.
And
Something
then
like that.
You got married while in law school then?
Is that right? Yeah, exactly. April, and I started, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I guess she, in the form of a life partner, gave you some confidence and encouragement to pursue this same thing that the professor did. Like, actually, here's something to tell any entrepreneur or anybody thinking about starting a business. In your experience, what advice might you give someone who needs to let go of one thing in order to grab something else, to like take that risk and start the business, whether it be interactions with mentors or listening to parents or self-doubt, like whatever direction you want to go with, it's something that was meaningful to you?
Advice I can give entrepreneurs that need to let go of one thing to go after another.
Yeah.
Have a really good reason why.
Yeah.
And it can't be monetary because, I mean, it can be, but it's really weak reason.
Yeah.
You got to have a really strong reason why.
And what was yours?
At the time, it was financial freedom.
Yeah.
It's not exactly monetary.
Sure.
It might
yeah.
sound that way, but it wasn't. It wasn't to make $1 billion or all the stuff. I just never wanted to be constrained the way that my parents had been.
Yeah.
And that every person I was around was. I just didn't want to live that way. I didn't want to have to wake up in the morning, go to a job, start doing the job, end the job.
Yep.
2 weeks later, get a paycheck, pay all my debt and all this stuff. I just didn't want to be in the middle of that. It just wasn't not what I wanted.
Do you think you were socialized into that, or do you think that you are innately born with that desire to be that way?
I don't think people are innately. I think there's obviously genetics play a big part in lots of things, like intelligence level is a big one.
Yeah.
And there's other things that they play a big part in. But I've seen entrepreneurs from many walks of life. I was an engineer. I was not a salesperson or a marketing person or any of those things.
Yeah.
I was not a business person. I never went to business school in my life, none of that stuff. So I came from an engineering background and became an entrepreneur. I see many people that do that. I see many people that are excellent salespeople that see an opportunity. I see marketing people build businesses. I see finance-oriented people build businesses. I'm not so convinced that there's like a mold of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I think there's other things that are characteristics, that lead people to becoming great entrepreneurs. But when it comes to fear, I think the thing that holds back most entrepreneurs is two things. I think fear is the thing that holds them back the most, and it's partially the reason why they go seek capital. Mm-hmm. It's the reason they don't take enough risk.
Yeah, on their own money,
exactly,
their own investments and time, yeah,
of their time and of just. I could be wrong. So I'm definitely wrong about, this is as much as I know, man. Yeah. I'm telling you my personal world experiences. I've never built a Facebook. I've never built a company that large. I look at those and say, well, they couldn't have done it without massive investment, great advisors, all that stuff, right? So of course those things have a place, but I think that being okay with that level of risk mentally and having this mental strength to pass through fear is, to me, one of the most important characteristics of being a successful entrepreneur. You're just faced with so much no and negativity, and
truly,
it's just always around you, and you have to learn how to calm your fear and deal with them. Yeah. Right? So I think that's one of the biggest ones.
Is there any practice that you took on to let go of the naysayers?
The more you hear from them, the more no's you hear, the more you're going to win.
Yeah.
Cardinal rule in business. The more people shit on your idea and tell you no, they don't want to buy it from you, the more likely you are going to be successful. And I know that sounds super counterintuitive,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
But it's not. Then the reason is, the more no you hear, if you're smart, you're going to change what you're doing so you get closer to a yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, easy way of thinking about it is Michael Jordan, they asked him, like, how is your free throw average, like, plus 80%? I don't remember what it was, but it was ridiculously high. It was so high, it just didn't make sense. And he said, I shot more free throws than anyone on the court.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, you have any questions? Right?
Feedback.
He just would stand out there and shoot 100 free throws, try to make 100 in a row.
Yeah.
It started with just shoot 100. Then it was try to shoot 20 in a row. I mean, his book, his autobiography, is a great example of the answer to that question. You just got to keep hearing the shit you don't want to hear so you can get closer to winning.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I get that. Cool.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the role that mentors played in your trajectory as a business owner, business builder?
I have actually, unfortunately, never, for a very long period of time, been one to be good at listening. Mm-hmm. There's a couple people that weren't, as I said, when I worked at Preston Gates, I met lawyers that really gave me the groundwork in being a professional. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. Actually, I don't think I listened to a ton of their advice because they were like telling me that I'm crazy that I dropped out of law school, which, we still joke about today, right? I'm not sure I listened to a lot of advice. And I know that was the wrong thing to do. I look back on it and go, man, if I knew anything about marketing back then, holy moly, right? Right. I mean, there was moments. I didn't have like advisors or mentors for Modus, but there were people that I listened to their opinion and trusted them, and I would ask them a question here and there, like once a year. Yeah. Some of the best advice I got was, look for where you have weaknesses, what you're not good at. I was really good at delivering a great product, but I knew nothing about sales, right? And so there was this guy that I met at my previous company who interviewed me for the job and hired me, actually. He was the guy that was like, yeah, we should hire that guy. Yeah. He lives out in Richmond. His name is John, and John gave me some great sales advice that to this day I follow. To this day, you should be in 2 meetings a day. If you're not really selling things. Yeah. Period. 2 meetings a day, every single day. They should be with prospects every day. Yeah. Great advice, and I've really followed that pretty strongly, and that really helped me build my company. So thank you, John. So. Does that answer your question? I didn't have a lot of great.
No. I think no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. It was after Modus was already in kind of full swing that your life was changed by having a kid. Your first son, you have 2 boys.
I do. I have two boys. We were surprised with our first one. Yeah. Julia was a teacher for KIPP Key Academy down in Washington, D.C., in Southeast D.C., like Anacostia on the other side of the river. And she loved her job, but that school system, she was with it when it was really small, and she really loved what it stood for and everything. And then it got really big because it was just so successful as a school system. And she kind of fell out with the way that they were managing. Everybody's got their opinions about things, of course. Yeah. They were doing spectacularly well. She decided she didn't any longer want to be a teacher for them in general. Yeah. She wanted to take a break from teaching. Yeah. It is a very hard job, man. KIPP teachers are 6 days a week, till 5 o'clock at night. I mean, it's a real big commitment.
What is KIPP?
It's a teaching system developed by a couple folks on the idea that kids that are need special attention. So most of the time, these kids are kicked out of public school. Okay. They probably have some sort of physical, issue, like they've been beaten. Stuff like that, like a lot of mental, physical issues, abuse issues, and so they there's this philosophy, this teaching philosophy that says a lot of the issue related to what's going on is because of their time not in school. Right. So keep them in school longer. That's 1. 2, teach them how to be good humans in school as a big part of the school curriculum, and expect the most from them, and slowly they'll start delivering it, and they'll become so connected with the school that they'll want to be there, and they'll start becoming great. And I'll tell you what, man, it's really magic, and it works. Yeah. And so KIPP went from like 3 schools in DC to like 10 schools in DC or something. Wow. Yeah. And she was like I think she was at the very first school, which was a middle school, and it just kind of blossomed into this wonderful place, doing really, really well. So she didn't want to be a teacher anymore, and I needed someone to pick up the phones at the office and like handle the mail and, pay the invoices and collect the money and stuff. And I know there's a lot of people out there that work with their significant other, and very successfully. So just put the
Shout out to them.
shout out to them, right? But not me and Julia. I'm sure she did not want to do that job.
Yeah.
So she started working at Midas, and we found out she was pregnant within like 2 weeks of working there. And we were like, what are we going to do? Because we're
Wow.
down one income, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
you're building
this company,
yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, I didn't take a penny for a salary out of it until like 2010, right?
Yeah.
So for a few years, I was just using its credit card to pay for my lifestyle, like, which was nothing, just food, you know. And
Yeah.
most of the time I was doing work anyways, right?
Yeah.
So, and you know, back then I was working my office. So I lived at the time in Rockville, Maryland, and my office was in DC. So I would sleep in my office for like a week straight just to get the work done.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have a choice. Talk about really wanting success.
Yeah.
That burn that you want it so bad, right? So when we found that out, it was a big, you know, it was a big shock. No big deal. Like we were really excited, and I had our first son. His name is Jaleel. I was at the hospital for like 9 hours total.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I remember we lost the deal. It's a true story. We lost the deal that Cleary was going to give us. It was like a really big law firm, big opportunity, big account. And we lost it because I couldn't answer the questions because I was in the middle of, you know, having a baby. And it was like, and notice I'm sharing that to say like that was where my head was at.
Yeah.
Because I still remember it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
That was important.
That was really important to me back then.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes to share the story of how like not tuned in as a father I was early on with my first son.
Yeah. Yeah. So were you pretty much like Jaleel was born, Julia's at home with him, and you're still cranking out 20-hour days and all of this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, back to the intelligence of my superhuman wife, she said it's not working because it wasn't. I was working 7 days a week. I mean, I just never wanted a break. I just wanted to just keep going. And, you know, I just didn't have any time for the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said to me, it's not working, and so we need to come up with something else. You need to at least give us the weekends. Mm-hmm. And so we were doing pretty well, and we needed to, like, get a reprieve on taxes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, at this point. And so we, the accountant said that you should move to Virginia. Mm-hmm. And we decided that on the weekends we'd live somewhere on the river because I fished a lot. Yeah. And I could just take a break and relax with our family. And so we bought a place up here in Marshall. Yeah. That was like 2011, 10 or 11, I can't remember. And, you know, that's our home now, which is kind of the interesting end of the arc of the story, right? Is it started out, we'd come up here Friday night, hang out Saturday, hang out Sunday, and then drive back Sunday night. And then it started becoming like we left Thursday night.
Yeah. So how did it change you, you know, going from 7 days a week to now your weekends with your family to now you're spending 3 days out in the country? Like, how are you as a human affected like that?
That's a really big question. So I'm going to break it into a couple parts. I'm not sure I was tuned into my family until about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was about 2014. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even sure, like, it was, I'll tell you, when I decided I was no longer really interested in growing Modus version 3 any further, because again, I wasn't going to get a big, you know, return from it. It was just not my company anymore, right?
Yeah.
I think when I kind of started to realize that, I came out of the fog of whatever path I had set myself on, you know, 5-6 years before, and just was marching. Yeah. As hard as I could every single day with very little thought to the repercussions around me. Yeah. And, you know, once that happened, I spent about a year transitioning to a new CEO, and halfway through that, we moved up here to Marshall full time.
Yeah.
Because my oldest son we needed to decide what we're going to do for a school, right?
Yeah.
We're in DC, it's public school, which we wouldn't send him to, or private school, which would be $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year, whatever it is. And so we weren't sure what to do, and we really loved being here. I mean, we loved our home.
Yeah.
We had like renovated it, and that was a nightmare. Do not renovate your home. Buy a home from ground up on the physical earth.
Ready to move in.
Or buy a home that you really like.
Yeah.
Do not try to super renovate your home. It's just such a headache. Anyways, so yeah, we decided that we were going to move here. And once we moved here, I was working, 5 days a week still, but really 2 days work from home at that point. I started spending a lot more time with my youngest son, Barack, and I realized how much I missed out on.
Yeah.
Right? Which is actually, the biggest advice that I would share with any successful entrepreneur or any person that is seeking to be a successful entrepreneur, whatever. They're in the middle of their journey, at the beginning of their journey, but they have children, and they have children after they had like kind of started the business.
Yeah.
It is so natural for entrepreneurs to give everything they have to the thing that they're seeking to accomplish.
Yeah.
What I came to realize in 2000, late 14, early 15, whenever it was, what I came to realize is all the success of this company and all the wealth and all the stuff and all this, it's great and it's there. And what I'm never, ever going to get back is my youngest son going from 1 to 4.
Yeah.
Never going to see that again.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't want to make that. Once I realized it, once I was tuned into it with my younger son, nothing in this world was going to stop me from experiencing those really, special moments.
Yeah. Yes. So
I miss like every vacation. I wouldn't go on vacation. The running joke in my family was they would know within a day or sometimes hours before our flight whether I was going to go on vacation with them or not.
Yeah. And most of the
All
time
of that
it wasn't.
I mean, I probably missed plus 50% of the vacations.
Yeah. So advice to your younger self would have been,
it's not about how hard you work.
Yeah.
It's not about how hard you work.
Yeah. What is it about us or people like us or people that are us younger that don't see that bigger picture, you think?
Some of us do.
Yeah.
Some of us are brought up seeing a much broader world. I think nurture plays a huge role in how far you see.
Okay.
And so when natural human behavior is, our decision making is based on how far we can see.
Yeah.
If I can see tomorrow, I'm going to decide about tomorrow. Most people that go to a job every day, they see about a couple days to a couple weeks ahead. Some of them see a couple months ahead. Very few of them see a couple years ahead.
Right.
How many? Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
How many times have you? I don't know how many times you've done this, but I've asked so many people in an interview, "What are you going to do in the next few years of your life?" I get some ridiculous, nonsensical answers that are obviously they haven't spent any time thinking about it, and I just prompted in their head right then, or it's like just flat no answer, or you find a couple people that have a real clear idea. There's a guy I'm working with right now. He was like, I want to learn how to run this component of the business. He's like, that's what I want to do in the next couple of years. Like, cool, you're hired.
Yeah.
Right? Because before you showed up here,
Yeah.
this is what you're thinking about. So I would say that nurture plays a big role in the lack of ability to see very far and see broad enough. And when you mix that with resilience, and like rhino thick skin and all this stuff, it just turns into a formula that, I would say another example of the same sort of characteristic, just a different version of it, is empathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd say a lot of CEOs lack empathy. I think a lot of it is the same reason. They're so tunnel vision.
Yeah.
That, and they're seeing as far as they can, so they don't realize the impact sometimes of what they're saying or doing and the distance. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to key in on resilience, because that's one of my favorite traits in people, and it's a trait that I hope my kids have. I believe you to be resilient, that you could take a beating and get back up and say, please, sir, can I have another? If you've got your mind set on a goal. So do you perceive your kids to be resilient, and how do you ensure them, or is that important to you? Is resilience important to you as it is to me?
Resilience is another one of those variables in the magic sauce of being a very successful entrepreneur. If you don't have a deep resilience, I'm going to give you a real world example. I have a very close friend who is exceptionally rich. Mm-hmm. He built a business, sold it for hundreds of millions of dollars, and was so resilient and tough through that period. Like, same story, lost everything, had nothing, had to beg his family members for money, that sort of thing. Was very successful, obviously, made it through, started an industry, and I'm not sure he wants to be talked about too much, so I won't even go any further than that. But, when I was hanging out with him recently, he's like got his fingers into all this stuff, and he's like spun up a few companies that have had some success. They're cash flowing, all this stuff, but it's just not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so we were just talking about business and all this stuff, and he said to me, I asked him, I was like, so what's up, man? Like, why are you, like, what's the thing, right? And he's like, I just don't care that much.
Yeah.
It just doesn't hurt enough. It's kind of what he was saying.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that resilience, that it's not that he doesn't have it anymore, he just doesn't need it.
So that's an interesting point, because you went from a point to needing it to, I'm going to suppose that you don't need it anymore, that your kids are going to grow up much more comfortably, or they are growing up more comfortably than you did. Do you have any fear that your kids are not going to be as resilient?
Oh, yeah, man.
How do you feel like you got to manufacture opportunities for them to build resilience, or do you just like step back and, Jesse Itzler says, sometimes my dad, would let the ball hit me in the face. He didn't catch it before it hit me in the face. And his kids are growing up billionaires and under their family. So he says, I got to let the ball hit my kids in the face as much as it hurt.
I don't ever let my kid, ever is a really big statement. It's almost never.
Yeah.
Very, very seldomly do I let them win at things that they're competing with me against. Mm-hmm. Because there's no such thing. I think our country, I watch soccer. Kids go to soccer practice. It's like nonsense. Like, I'm sorry, and this is a very extreme statement, but competition is at the heart of resilience. And for some reason, we're softening competition and saying things like, well, everyone can be a winner, and everyone gets a gold star, and everyone gets a trophy for going to soccer and being awful at it. Yeah. Not okay.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I'm
not okay.
Yeah, I don't know what listeners think, but I'm 100% with you.
I understand that we want to build up our kids, but let's do it correctly. Mm-hmm. When my kids do things that are outside of what they normally do and are a success, I praise that success as much as I physically can, to the point where they get a little uncomfortable, because I want them to understand that they just won, and that's what it's about. It's about winning the thing that you are seeking to win, to build that confidence so that in the future, they don't have some weird manufactured nonsensical confidence.
Yeah.
They recognize they have to work hard to get the things that they want. And they have to earn them. And it's going to be tough. Like, my oldest son was not good at soccer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I told you about this. Like, he's just not good at soccer. And it took years of him wanting to play soccer, and now he's like good. Like, he's, scoring a bunch of goals, like got recruited to play. And, he's young, he's 9 years old, but there's people recruiting him to play on travel teams and all that stuff. Why? Because Dad, how'd I do? Well, I mean, you did some things well.
I feel like success breeds desire for more of it, which in turn makes people want to work hard to, practice. I want to get better, so I got to practice. I put in the work.
I think children need to distinguish the difference between success and winning versus just being a part of the pack.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Well, in my opinion, if you want your kids to step out of the pack and be different and do things and use their brain the way that they imagine, all this stuff, that doesn't happen by being part of the pack, right?
Right. Yeah. If you want to be the same, you got to do the stuff everybody does. If you want to be different, you got to do stuff different than everybody.
And I think the different part is they have to understand where success is, where success lies. And you can't establish any of that through negative behavior, like negative reactions, or I don't know what to categorize it as. Only through positive affirmation do you build your child's confidence, I have found.
Yeah.
And the more confidence you build in your child at an early age, real confidence, not like, good job, you did just as good as everyone else. That's irrelevant, right?
Right.
But really build up on their successes, the more, like you said, they are going to take more risks.
Yeah.
They are going to push their own edge. And as they push their edge, that's when you can coach them. That's when you can give them a little bit of a corrective, like nudge left and right, a half an inch. Not very much, because that's going to be, self-defeating. So you have to be very careful with that, right?
It's something that I've enjoyed a lot. And my daughter hadn't been doing it lately, but I told you we signed her up for jiu-jitsu for a little while. And one of my favorite things was watching my daughter get choked out, tapping out, and then starting again. Like
Awesome.
At 4 years old, she just got her ass handed to her, and she smiled and was like, I want to do that again.
Yes.
And like that lesson of, overcoming. I lost. You controlled me. You owned me. You could do whatever you want to. I submit. But I'm ready to get up and try again, I think is just an extraordinary lesson. So what are some other characteristics or traits that you want your boys to have as they grow up?
I want them to be the nicest people around.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important traits. I want them to be gentle with their words and their actions. I want them to think about other people before they open their mouth. And I want them to smile and be happy about how it is, not what they want, not a desire of what other people have. I just want them to be happy in general about what is right now in the moment. That's if I were to simplify what I want for my kids, it's that. I find it very hard to have that if you're not moving towards something that you desire.
Yeah. You qualified that beautifully towards the end. That made everything make sense to me. So how has having kids changed you? And maybe a characteristic that you didn't have that you do now, or something that was cultivated?
I think if you ask some of, I hope you never do this. If you ask some of the people that I worked with at Midas, they would tell you that I was a scary human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't nice. I was not the nicest person in the world.
The
I don't
opposite of the way you want your kids to be.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I was, in a lot of ways, just wrong attitude about things, hard on people to a point where they couldn't handle it, stuff like that. I hurt a lot of people, and, I wish I could turn back time and change all that. Now, kind of learning the lessons. And where did I learn them? I learned a lot of those lessons by becoming a father.
Yeah.
If with an employee, it only matters so much.
Mm-hmm.
When you see that pain in your son's eyes, it changes you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that changed me. I think that's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things changed me, honestly. A lot of other things. I think yoga changed me a lot as well.
Yeah.
So I think it was just a mix of things that happened to me about 5 years ago, or it started 4 or 5 years ago. But I think the other thing that being a parent, I'm sure everybody on this podcast has said the same thing, but patience is, I think people that don't have kids don't know what patience means, really. Even if they have, I would qualify that by saying if they have someone like a family member that they have to do caretaking for, whether it's a brother, sister, mom, or dad, then they understand patience. But patience is hardcore different once you're a parent.
Yeah.
And so recognizing, my kids aren't the same intelligence level, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the same athletic ability. They're not the same musically inclined. Don't get the same sort of scores at school.
Yeah.
They're not one of them doesn't have a lot of friends. The other one has lots of friends. I mean, they're so different.
Yeah.
And so there's no right way of doing it. You just have to be patient and just, deal with the stuff.
God, it's so true. I feel like a kid's job is to put you in a position that you never could have conjured in your own imagination and then make you deal with it and figure out a way out of it.
Just all sorts of stuff. Why did you flush your toys into the toilet? We have to now call people to pump our system underneath the freaking building. Why did you do that?
The city folks don't know how septic tanks work, but
Yeah.
you guys can Google that one or YouTube it.
Holy moly. Yeah, so anyways, it's, yeah, exactly right. It's like, why would you do this? And it is always some weird thing.
Yeah. Well, I want to be sensitive to your time, so I want to knock out some kind of quick, short answer questions. So
By all means.
what's an advantage that, other than, well, no, let's just go straight ask the question. What's an advantage that you had growing up that your kids will not have growing up?
Poor. Huge
about-
advantage.
How about vice versa? What's an advantage that your kids have that you didn't have?
They're not poor. Again, there's just so many good characteristics with both.
Yeah.
The hunger
Mm-hmm.
is real. And if you have it and you mix it with all the other stuff, it's a very powerful formula. But if you have the other stuff, it gives you a leg up.
Yeah.
Right?
What's if you recall, what is one of the better pieces of parenting advice that you have received?
Seemingly not really important one, but I'll share it. It goes back to your question about how do you help your kids, win. If your kids are in sports and you are not their coach, don't say a word when you're at the game.
Do I totally relate to that?
I had an incredibly hard time. I was that parent that was all excited because I'm just an excitable person. I'm just excited in general. Yeah. My kid gets the ball. I'm like on fire, There's a great thing on YouTube about this. One of the most successful basketball coaches in history talks about his two sons and how he goes to the game and he sits in the crowd just like any other normal person and says absolutely nothing. And then after the game, when the kids ask him this and that, he goes, "Did you ask your coach first about that?"
I completely agree with that 1,000%, and it is so hard to keep your mouth shut, especially when your kids have shitty coaches.
Shittiest. And what do you do? Because you're like, I don't know what to do. You know what you do? You get a different coach for your kid, but you still stay really, really quiet because you got to entrust the coaching to that person. What your kid needs to see is that person is in charge. That person is driving the strategy. You need to look up to them. You need to listen to them. Don't come to me, right? I don't know. That was really good advice.
That's hard to do. So what's an attribute of yours as a father that you're proud to have?
Attribute of mine that I'm proud of.
What's something that makes you a good dad?
That I'm Iranian.
Yeah.
I think it's a big one. I came up in a very Iranian family, so a lot of culture, expectations around respect for elders, for each other, being around the family a lot. I think that's a really positive characteristic that I have as a father that I think is unique.
Cool. Very cool. So if you were writing a book about your life as a parent, what might be the name of a chapter or two of that book?
You should give these questions out beforehand.
No way. Not a chance. You should have listened to the one before you came in.
That's a good point. Hint to those folks. One chapter might be, they may not love or be good at the things that you love or are good at.
Yeah. That takes us. Did you find that's difficult to adjust to?
I don't think I've adjusted yet.
I'm disappointed that my kids don't love fly fishing the way I love fly fishing.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you because I haven't actually dealt with it.
Yeah.
I'm still struggling with it, I think that's a good chapter, maybe one more chapter. Everything you do should be to make them greater than you.
It's wonderful. I love that. All right. Who's one of your favorite fictional dads? Maybe a TV dad or a movie dad?
Full House, the dad on Full House, lives in a very weird setup in the family, but loved his kids unconditionally, did everything to support them, took care of them, so, everything. It was a real positive show, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of like beating your kids,
Right,
it was just all the right attitude, super positive, regardless of circumstances, regardless of your living conditions. None of that stuff matters.
Yeah.
What matters is positive energy in the family and at the household,
Mm-hmm.
and making the best of what you have and helping them be successful with whatever you have and whatever they have.
That's great. I loved that show. Danny Tanner.
Yeah, Danny
Uncle
Tanner. that's
Joey and Uncle Jesse, kind of raised by a village a little bit.
right. Yeah.
So this is a question I like a lot. You know who Tim Ferriss is?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he asked this question. It's the billboard question. If you had a billboard on I-95 and all the dads are driving by at 80 miles an hour and you get one piece of advice that fits on that billboard for them to read as they drive by, what advice would you put on that billboard?
Everything can be solved through love, but it cannot be solved without it.
Right, so that's a great segue into asking the question, when do you feel the most loved in your life?
When generally do I feel it, or when have I felt it?
When do you feel like an extraordinary amount of love?
I really enjoy physical contact. I'm just one of the, right? So this is about being a father. So I'd say this show is about being a father. So I'd say one of the moments where I feel an intense amount of love is when I get a big hug from my kids.
Yeah.
And it happens every morning. Right now they're in California,
Yeah.
but when I wake up in the morning, they're in my bed at 6:00 in the morning, waking me up, and that's like, it's awesome. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. So you get both kids hugging you at the same
Oh
time.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And it's not because you asked for it; it's because they decided to come give it to you.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the coolest. All right. So, what do you think is just in general the role of a father?
To build a better society than we are living in right now, and not to say that's bad. Like it might have sounded a little negative. I don't mean that in any way. I just mean to build a better world tomorrow and the next time, and bring the traits of how to do that along with the growth, and to further humanity.
That'll be
in our reach.
Barack and Jalil's responsibility too, is to make sure that their kids are better than they were.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Physical gift, or maybe not even physical gift, but what gift, if money was no object, would you give to every single father on the planet?
What gift would I give every single father on the planet if there was, it was just like I could bat my,
Yeah. Wave your magic wand.
Mm-hmm. To remember that children are not adults, and that they replicate and mimic and grow up into whatever you show them every day. So if you want to be effective, you have to show them exactly what you want them to be every single day with every one of your interactions with them. So I would give them that realization, I think, is first.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't really, it took me a long time to realize that, first. And second, and that has to be done in a positive, productive manner.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's been a common theme in all of these conversations, I think, is that to be the best parent, you have to be the best you. That if you're not constantly seeking to improve every day, you're not being the example or the person that you could be to your kids. I feel like it's your obligation
Excellent.
as a parent to do that. And I'm open. I want to be open-minded to maybe there are different ways to do it, but that is the consistent theme that I'm learning about parenthood is you have to constantly be trying to get better, to be inspiring.
Yeah. It's very easy. The way our brains are wired, it's super easy for us to just be what we are, the same, and repeat our behavior, especially, when you can alter them very easily as well.
Yeah.
When you can alter your brain. So the point is that is a defensive mechanism that is evolutionarily part of who we are as people and animals, right? Animals are exactly the same, right?
Yeah, we're not that far from chimps.
No, we're not.
Yeah.
And a lot of these characteristics are the same as dogs have. Consistency, they want the same thing, all that kind of stuff. It's very natural for us to want to be the same, but that's not humanity. That's not the evolution of humanity. The evolution of humanity is about being better the next day.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I could not agree with your statement more. I think it's a very, very well stated.
Yeah, it's a talk about evolution of the messages of the. We got to have close to 50 or 60 hours of conversations like this, and it just says you've put it differently than anyone else, but it is concise in that it's the same message of
very interesting
improvement and being that. So I'll ask you 2 more questions.
Fire away.
The first being, what kind of father do you want to be remembered as?
What kind of father I want to be remembered as?
I know this sounds crazy, but it would be amazing if one of my kids was the president.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's super far-fetched. I mean,
No.
I think my kids are getting a very, very rounded upbringing. So it'd be really cool if I was remembered as a dad that helped that, right? But I guess maybe a not so extreme statement that I'm good at cultivating a person's natural abilities and not seeking them to have things or abilities that they don't have.
Yeah.
Work with what they have.
Encourage them to be their truest
Best self.
Yeah. Best.
Lean into what you're really good at
Yeah.
and help them do that.
Cool.
And find the courage and confidence to do it and recognize that that is what they're good at. And these other things are interested in,
Yeah.
right? But maybe they're just interested in them more than taking them seriously.
I can't imagine growing up otherwise. Like my dad and his brother and his sister grew up in a time where it was like, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a nurse. Like, so go do that now.
Yeah.
Like without the option to represent yourself. You just put on this path and pull the string and you just kind of waddle towards it. Super grateful to be in a world where we can be whatever we want and find a path.
Yes.
Really cool.
And really cool that this country provides us that opportunity. And I like you, I don't know what other countries do, but I've definitely visited them. I spent a lot of time in other countries. Not a ton, but enough to see the difference, right? It's very different. So we are very fortunate to have what we have here.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Lastly, in the event this recording lasts forever, what is a message that you would like your kids and their kids and their kids and their kids to hear from you?
Oh, man, that's a big ask. What is a message I'd like my kids to hear and their kids to hear? Pay careful attention to the world because it speaks to you in weird ways. And oftentimes it whispers. It doesn't yell. And be aware and alert about when it is showing you a pattern. Because a lot of times it's just weird. It just feels very interconnected. And you should follow your instincts in those moments rather than much else.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's so much I would have loved to talk to you about. I would have loved gotten into education with you
Sure.
and different ideas with that. Maybe we'll have to do a follow-up and
Yeah.
get to talk again. But I had a blast talking with you, man.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. You're the man.